Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Kris. So this is a special video. This is a special request by me. This is who most likely committed the gruesome, it's Villisca, but people call it Villisca Axe Murders. 6 children, 2 parents dead, documentary. But before we get started, this is why it's special. Because I'm going to it, baby. I'm going. Got my ticket right here. Paid. All right. I know what you're thinking. Why are you showing us this, Kris? Because it's awful. No, I was looking it up. Here it is. It's awful early. No, I'm going on the 15th, so this will be put out. It'll be the 14th. It'll be Friday the 14th. And I will go and do this tour. It's going to be so fun. It's about a 5.5 hour drive for about a 45-minute tour. I'm not going to stay the night. It's $199 a night for a room or $5.99 for the house. I would love to do that. Can't. I have pets. I just can't do it. Too much responsibility here. But I would love to. All right. Before we get started, if you can click that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you like. And there's a thanks button there. You can click on that, donate if you'd like to. All right, let's get into it.
On the night of June 9th, 1912, 6 members of the Moore family, along with 2 young guests, were brutally murdered in their beds in the small town of Villisca, Iowa. Who could have done such a heinous crime? After a nationwide manhunt, 10 years of investigation and multiple grand jury hearings and trials, the answer to this question remains unknown. In today's episode, we'll be investigating the mystery of the Villisca Axe Murders to find out what most likely happened.
There's also a theory. I don't know if I should say it. It doesn't really matter. There's a theory that the person rode trains. I covered BuzzFeed doing this a couple years ago. And I had this on my bucket list. But there's a theory that the person rode trains, and there were several axe murders that year and the year before, maybe. It was like 3 cities I know for sure. And one of them was Monmouth, Illinois, which is about a little over an hour away from me. And on a side note, it's Monmouth is the home of Wyatt Earp. I kept wanting to say Kevin Costner, and then I was like, nope, that's not him, and it's not Russell, and it just couldn't come to me.
Villisca is a quiet small town in Iowa with a tight-knit community. The Moore family lived in a white 2-story timber house along East 2nd Street. The members of the family were Josiah, 43, Sarah, 39, and their 4 children, Herman, 11, Mary Catherine, 10, Arthur Boyd, 7, and Paul Vernon, 5. On Sunday evening, June 9th, the family went to the Children's Day service at their Presbyterian church. They were accompanied by Ina May Stillinger, 8, and Lena Gertrude Stillinger, 12, friends of the children who had asked to stay at the Moore's house overnight. After the service, the group mingled with other church members until at least 9:30 p.m. It was a damp and cool night. The group walked 3 blocks to their home. They enjoyed some cookies and milk.
They also walked in the pitch black because the electricity in the town, the town city council, I'll say, was having issues with the electric company, and they were going back and forth. So the electric company decided, we're going to cut all electricity to the town. Now see how you like it. Well, this coincides with the people going there. They're walking home. It was bad timing.
Before everyone went to bed, the couple was asleep upstairs in their room. The 4 more children were together in another room down the hall. The Stillinger sisters were in a guest room on the first floor. Sometime after midnight, a person or persons unknown picked up the axe in the backyard and entered the house. All of the children were bludgeoned to death.
They think that he could have already, more likely he, could have already been in the house and picked up the axe, took it in the house because it was dark, potentially, got into the house and was in a crawl space because there were cigarettes in there. And unless the kids decided they wanted to go in there and smoke cigarettes, then I got to believe it was probably the adult.
With the blunt edge of the axe, while Josiah, persons unknown, picked up the axe in the backyard and entered the house. All of the children were bludgeoned to death with the blunt edge of the axe, while Josiah and Sarah were hacked to death. After some time, the murderer left the grisly scene, locking the house behind him.
He, a little disappointing they're going over it so fast. He stuck around, had a meal, covered up all the mirrors in the house, by the way, had a meal, and there was a 4-pound slab of bacon in the Stillinger room, the room where the Stillinger girls were at. A 4-pound slab of bacon that they don't know what was there for, but there is fear that it was for masturbatorial needs, because one of the girls, they think how her body was positioned, she might have woken up, and I believe she was missing her underwear, or it was pulled down a little bit. I don't remember exactly. Those are the types of things that I don't exactly try to remember. But, and then this is the neighbor.
The murderer left a grisly scene, locking the house behind him. At 7:30 a.m. the next morning, the Moore's neighbor, Mary Peckham, discovered that her neighbor's house was unusually dark and quiet. The family usually woke up early to do their chores, while Josiah left for work. Worried that something had happened, she went to the house and knocked on the door. After several knocks without a response, she tried the door only to find that it was locked. So she called Ross Moore, Josiah's brother, hoping that he could check on the family. Ross arrived at around 8 a.m. He knocked on the door and shouted, but he received no response. Using his copy of the house key, he unlocked the door and entered the house. He started looking around downstairs and discovered 2 figures covered with a sheet in the guest bedroom. Ross immediately told Mary Peckham to call the police. Henry Hank Horton, Villisca's primary peace officer, arrived and proceeded to search the entire house. He discovered that aside from the Stillinger girls, the entire Moore family had been murdered. The murder weapon, Josiah's axe, was found in the guest room where the Stillinger sisters were located. According to the coroner, the murders had occurred sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. The police found 2 spent cigarettes in the attic, which suggested that the killer or killers had patiently waited there until all the people in the house were asleep. Based on the reconstruction of the crime, the killer took an oil lamp from a dresser, removed the chimney, which was placed under a chair, bent the wick in 2 to minimize the flame, before lighting the lamp. He turned the lamp down so low that only a glimmer of light came out. Carrying the axe, the killer then went to the master bedroom and started bludgeoning Josiah and Sarah Moore. The police found a gouge mark on the ceiling of the room, which was left by the murderer when he lifted the axe to hit Josiah. The Moore children were murdered next. The killer used the blunt end of the axe to hit their heads. Then the killer went to the downstairs guest bedroom and murdered Ina and Lena. Based on the defensive wound on her arm, as well as how her body was found, the police believed that Lena Stillinger was awake when the killer struck her. She was partially undressed, which suggested possible sexual assault, though doctors later proved this to be unlikely. Afterwards, the killer returned to the master bedroom to inflict more blows on the couple. In the process, he knocked over a shoe that had become filled with blood. He also systematically bludgeoned the Moore children's heads to a bloody pulp. All of the victims' heads were covered by sheets and clothing. The windows, as well as mirrors and any other reflective surfaces, were covered with bed sheets, aprons, skirts, and towels. Investigators found a 2-pound slab of bacon taken out of the icebox and wrapped in a towel. It was placed next to the axe and a keychain that did not belong to the Moores. They also discovered partially eaten food beside a bowl full of bloody water. After the police, the coroner, several doctors, and a minister had thoroughly gone through the crime scene, word of the horrific murders had spread throughout the town. Though the police told the citizens not to go inside the house, at least 100 townspeople traipsed through the Moore's house to satisfy their morbid fascinations, thereby ruining any evidence that the police might have missed.
Some of the people that went through, one in particular. Okay, so some of the people that went through, I'll get back to the one. They took picture frames. They just like took pictures in frames. They took. So, when the police came back, somebody was playing with the axe in the front yard. So, but the worst was somebody wanted some souvenirs, so they took fragments of Josiah Moore's skull. So, and we think that we're civilized.
Who committed the Villisca Axe Murders? The police tried to search the town. However, with the 4 to 5 hour head start, they believed that he was already long gone. They even used bloodhounds to track the scent that the killer left on the axe, letting the dogs roam around the streets of Villisca and surrounding areas. Unfortunately,
Back in those days, 4 or 5 hours got you, 2 miles out of town? And the police were like, he's way too far now. We'll never catch him. All right, let's just pin this on somebody in town and move on.
couldn't find any leads. Despite the lack of evidence pointing to the identity of the killer, the police did have a few viable suspects. The first one suspected by the townspeople was Frank Jones. Frank Jones was an Iowa state senator and local businessman who was in competition with Josiah Moore. Josiah had worked for Jones for 7 years before leaving and establishing his own business selling farm equipment. It was also rumored that Josiah was having an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law, though this was never proven. The residents of Villisca insisted that the two harbored a deep hatred for each other. But was this hatred enough for Jones to brutally massacre an entire family, as well as 2 little girls who were simply unlucky enough to have slept over?
The feud between those two, Josiah Moore worked for the senator, Jones. And when Moore started his own company, he took the big account, which was the John Deere account. And so there were people who thought they had beef. And you would see them when they'd walk through the street. They could be on the same sidewalk approaching each other. And one would cross the street and go on the other side on the other sidewalk, just so they didn't have to cross the street, or just so they didn't have to cross each other. That's how much they hated one another.
Aside from Jones, every hobo, transient, and stranger in Villisca at the time were considered suspects. One of these transients was S.A. Sandy Sawyer. He was detained by the sheriff a few days after the murder when a bridge foreman named Thomas Dyer claimed that he had seen Sawyer muttering, "I will cut your goddamn heads off," while striking the piles with his axe. However, he was later released when the police learned that he had been in Osceola, Iowa at the time of the murders. Another suspect for the murders was a man known as Reverend Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly. Kelly was an English immigrant who reportedly had mental health problems when he was an adolescent. He also had a history of sexual deviancy, peeping and asking young girls to pose nude for him. Kelly was a traveling preacher who held services in various Methodist churches across Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, and North Dakota. He came to Villisca on June 8 to teach at the Children's Day services, which the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters attended on the day of the murders. He left the town the morning following the murders at 5:19 a.m. by boarding the number 5 train headed west. Allegedly, he told his fellow travelers about 8 dead souls in Villisca who were butchered in their sleep. At that time, the bodies had not been discovered yet. Kelly returned to Villisca 2 weeks later, reportedly posing as a Scotland Yard detective. He toured the crime scene with a group of investigators. In addition, he was very fascinated with the case, sending letters to the police and investigators. Reportedly, he also sent a bloody shirt to a dry cleaner sometime after the murders. Due to his odd behavior, the police became suspicious of Kelly and eventually arrested him. He confessed to the murders, stating that God had whispered to him to suffer the children to come unto me. However, he recanted his confession during his trial, claiming police brutality. The jury was deadlocked. A second jury was brought in, but this resulted in Kelly's acquittal. No one else has ever been tried for the murders. Another viable suspect was a man.
There's, from the things that I've seen, I think that he was insane. The minister, reverend, preacher, he was insane, but I don't think he was guilty of the crime.
Named Henry Lee Moore, not related to the murdered Moore family. Henry was a suspected serial killer and convicted axe murderer. He murdered his mother and grandmother with a rusty coal axe. He was sentenced to life in prison on March 14, 1918. Some believed that he was responsible for several unsolved axe murders, including the Villisca Axe Murders. However, he was never officially charged for the Moore family murders. Speaking of serial killers, one theory is that the Villisca Axe Murders were committed by a serial killer, one that had been killing families in a similar fashion throughout the Midwest, as well as in Texas and Colorado. According to researchers, these crimes had several similarities. Aside from the fact that all the victims had been bludgeoned with an axe, in several of the murders, mirrors and windows were also covered with cloth or clothing. In addition, in 3 of the cases, the authorities found a lamp without a chimney, with the wick turned down low at the crime scene. Moreover, the victims' heads were similarly covered, just like in the Villisca crime scene. Some of these unsolved murders include cases that occurred in Colorado Springs, Colorado, Ellsworth, Kansas, and Paola, Kansas. Some believe that these were all the work of a serial killer, perhaps the first one ever in the country. The detective, James Newton Wilkerson, suspected a man called Gleadson Mansfield to be the culprit, who may or may not have been hired by Jones to kill the Moore family. However, Mansfield had an alibi for the Villisca murders, according to his payroll records. Detective Wilkerson believed that Mansfield's alibi and subsequent release from police custody was simply due to Jones's political influence. The lack of evidence in the Villisca Axe murders makes this case incredibly difficult to solve. While there are plenty of potential suspects, we don't think that any of them were the right ones. For example, Reverend Kelly was a man of slight build, only 5 foot 2 inches in height and weighing 119 pounds. The coroner stated that Kelly was physically incapable of the crimes. Moreover, he was at the same service as the Moores. It's unlikely that he was able to enter the house and hide in the attic after the family had gone back. As a stranger in town, he wouldn't have been able to arrive at the house before they did. As for Frank Jones, the details regarding his rivalry with Moore and their intense hatred for each other was only based on rumors. It doesn't seem that he would have an entire family eliminated just for a business and an alleged affair. As for Henry Lee Moore and Gleadson Mansfield, there is a lack of physical evidence to support the idea that either one is the murderer. So what most likely happened to the Moore family of Villisca, Iowa? Based on the details of the investigation, as well as the similarities between this case and other unsolved axe murders, we are leaning towards an unknown serial killer. This large string of murders occurred in places that were near railroads. In addition, these murders occurred during the early 1900s, a time where people typically left their door unlocked, and most houses had an axe which was often left lying in the yard. So it wouldn't be too difficult for a stranger to get his hands on the murder weapon and enter an empty house, just waiting for its residents to go to bed. Whether or not these cases are truly connected remains to be proven. A lot of the pieces of evidence fit the pattern, but there are slight differences. One thing we can be sure of: the person who killed the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters had experience. He knew that using the blunt edge of the axe makes it easier to strike fatal blows without the weapon getting lodged in the wound, making it easier to strike multiple times. He's also able to easily navigate the house without waking up the residents with only a dim lamplight to guide him. Most importantly, he knew how to avoid leaving fingerprints. The killer's meticulous staging of the crime scene also suggests experience. This was not the first time he had committed such an act. As for the identity of the serial killer, it can only remain unknown, at least for now. If you like...
Yeah. I mean, it's over 100 years now, 113 years. So, I remember I finished reading the book. It's somewhere down there. Oh, I almost fell. Oh, I can't find it. Oh, that's not it. Give me a second. I'll find it. All right, I found it. Just Villisca. Oh, by Roy Marshall. It's not very big. It's about 382 pages before the epilogue. Which whole book is, if you're interested, 388 pages. So there you go. But anyways, I wanted to cover it again because I had said on the last one this is on my bucket list, and it's going to come true. So I'm excited. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.